This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton, bringing you the news behind the news. As part of our series on the upcoming election of the new Los Angeles County Sheriff, we've interviewed most of the candidates. In our recent interview with Assistant Sheriff Todd Rogers, he was highly critical of former Under-Sheriff Paul Tanaka, who is also a candidate. Assistant Sheriff Rogers' criticisms of Mr. Tanaka were so specific and direct that we thought we should get a response from Mr. Tanaka.
Almost everything that comes out of Todd's mouth is campaign rhetoric, if not an outright lie.
We have put together this debate for you to see and to help you make a better decision when you vote. Full Disclosure wanted to know what role former Sheriff Baca is playing in influencing the election. Our first question to candidate Rogers was to get his opinion of the way former Sheriff Leroy Baca endorsed several of the candidates at the same time. Following is Mr. Tanaka's response. By endorsing three people to come into the race, inviting them to come into the race, and then putting his support, real support behind one of those candidates, that this would in effect split up the vote.
Yes, yes. I've been involved in politics since 2001. I'm an elected official in Lakewood, so I'm not a neophyte when it comes to campaigning and political strategy. Certainly it's running a campaign on this scale is different to me, but I understand politics, and it does not make sense to encourage three people to run. If you really want an inside candidate, you find the candidate that is most credible and the most untainted by all these things that have been going on, and you get behind that person.
Todd Rogers expressed the belief that the reason Sheriff Baca injected these other people's names instead of just one was to divide up the field, divide up the votes, to split the vote, so to speak. Did that how you perceive it?
No, no. You know, if you look at the sheriff's track record for endorsements from the time he was first elected in 99 or 98 until he left office, he had an unbelievable reputation for being multiple endorser, dual endorser. You're in the race, I'm in the race, he likes you, he likes me. You ask him for the endorsement first, I come in second, ultimately. And we had many candidates that would express their unhappiness. Wait, he just endorsed me, why did he endorse my opponent? He's been doing it for 15 years. And so to me, when he did that, where I'm supporting Jim Helmold and Todd Rogers, that's just the sheriff being the sheriff. It's consistent with who he has been for ever since he's been in office. I don't view that as intentionally done on the part of Lee Baca to split any votes. I think he did it because he was just being who he is, a nice guy.
Candidate Rogers was troubled by how former Sheriff Baca was continuing to meddle in the race for his old position.
I'm not real happy with things that he did as the sheriff, and I'm not real happy with the way he's conducted himself behind the scenes with his campaign, quite frankly. But he is responsible for everything. And in terms of these federal investigations that are going on, I think it's very possible that he's criminally culpable.
Well, that's a rather bold pronouncement coming from someone who has nothing to do with the investigation, first and foremost. And he can be unhappy that the sheriff is working behind the scenes. But after 48 years in office, the sheriff is certainly entitled. Lee Baca is entitled to his opinion, and he can help whoever he wants to. And if it's because it's not Todd, oh well. I mean, the sheriff has earned the right to support whoever he wants to support, and I don't begrudge him for that at all.
I called an individual for an endorsement, and she told me, she goes, Todd, I'd love to endorse you, but I endorsed Helmold a month ago, and it was a month before Sheriff Baca announced his resignation. So that tells me that there was a lot of conspiratorial things going on.
I see.
And that's why I'm really dismayed and disgusted with the way the whole thing has happened.
Well, that's a first. But then again, every time I hear Todd Rogers speak, I hear something new that is inconsistent with something that he said yesterday or the week before. So, listen, and even if the sheriff did that, it's still his prerogative. He was the sheriff, And if he decides he's going to choose an heir apparent, that's his call. And if you're unhappy about it, that's your problem.
According to Assistant Sheriff Rogers, one of his tasks was to clean up the mess left behind by Under Sheriff Tanaka.
Well, the first things I had to do was go meet with the Board of Supervisors because they were withholding money from us because they didn't care for Mr. Tanaka. I went to the board and I explained our budget situation and established, and I had a better relationship with the board than my predecessor did. But I met with the staff, met with the board members, and was able to secure an additional $40 million for our budget to begin that healing process.
Now, of all the things that he's talked about, that's the most outrageous statement of all. Sheriff went over budget in 2001. He had a different chief. He knew that I was a certified public accountant in the state of California, so he asked me to come inside, against my wishes, administratively, and help him understand the budget. Those were his words. He said, we have a large department, and there's not a single person in this organization that can explain it to me, and I certainly don't understand it. As sheriff, is what he said. Over the course of the next 11 years, our budget grew from $1.7 to $2.8 billion. During that period of time, there were some years we suffered $80 to $100 million cuts to our previous year's budget. I'm proud to say that during those 11 years, despite hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts, some restored, a growth in budget because of contracts, etc., from 1.7 to 2.8. Not only did we make budget successfully under my management and leadership for 11 straight years, we paid back the $25 million to the general fund COFERS so that the sheriff could look the board and the taxpayers in the eye and said, I repaid my debt that I went over in 2001. The $40 million that Todd refers to, that was all money that was coming as a result of AB 109 money. It was restoration from about 5 years of devastating cuts because of what was termed the Great Recession. They weren't withholding money. How irresponsible would that be of 5 board members in a 10 million person population county to withhold money from public safety because they have a personal grudge against me? I don't think that's possible. If I thought that were possible, I would be thinking way too highly of myself. He's given me far too much credit. Every year, the board allocated to us what A, they thought we needed, and B, what they thought they could afford. Look, we have differences in personalities, clashes, but I have never believed for a moment that the board withheld money because of those personality differences.
Candidate Rogers condemned Mr. Tanaka for his actions as undersheriff. Do you think it should have been on the record what was happening?
Well, in terms of investigation and discipline, of course I do. Of course I do. And I think there were several examples throughout the course of Tanaka's career, especially over the last 15 years, where he should have been investigated and disciplined, and he wasn't. And there were other people who were in this group who had things overlooked because they were connected. But I think it should go even farther. I think he should be criminally indicted.
Now, where does Baca fit into all of this? Isn't he implicated by allowing this to happen?
Yes. He's the leader of the organization. He's responsible for everything that happens in the department. He created Tanaka. He elevated him from lieutenant to undersheriff over a period of 15 years.
Well, you know, Todd mentioned earlier that he's been in politics for a long time. It's very clear that his style of politics and my style of politics are different. He's obviously a mudslinger, and maybe that's how he got elected each and every time. I've never operated that way. The way I operate is you stick to the message, you tell the people what your qualifications are and what you're going to bring to them as an elected official, and you let the voters decide. For him to make these kind of bold statements that he should be criminally indicted. Here's a man who himself has been elevated from lieutenant to assistant sheriff by Baca. And he is a person who also has zero knowledge about the federal case. He does not know the facts. And so when he speaks purely of ignorance.
I have inside knowledge of some of these things that took place. because I've actually spoken to some of the defendants in these federal cases who have told me that they were directed to do what they did by Mr. Tanaka, by Sheriff Baca, and I think it's reprehensible that they're facing trial for doing what they were told to do.
What level of inside knowledge do you think he has?
Look, Todd makes a lot of claims. Todd says a lot of things. They're either based on campaign rhetoric, they're inflated claims. They certainly are designed to make someone believe that he's better than he really is. I don't know what inside knowledge he's speaking of.
We asked Todd Rogers to share his inside knowledge.
If you have a junior deputy who's working Men's Central Jail and the undersheriff or sheriff order him to get an inmate and take him from point A to point B and guard him and don't let anybody talk to him unless the undersheriff approves it, that deputy's probably going to do that. And he'd probably do it again. He doesn't necessarily know that they're obstructing an investigation by the FBI or hiding this guy from the FBI. So certainly the media has been more interested in that because it's more sensational.
Well, it'd be interesting if the prosecutor would want to see this clip, because since he's claiming to have so much knowledge, maybe he should go and go before the grand jury or serve as a witness in a trial. See, this is all just nonsense. He's talking. He's claiming that he was talking to people, and yet nobody's allowed to talk to anybody. I mean, the investigation is ongoing. So is he telling the truth? Is he once again making himself more important than he really is? I don't know.
You just told us that the circumstances under which it became public knowledge that Paul Tanaka is the subject of a federal investigation. It was the U.S. Attorney who basically released that information in the process of the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Is that ethical?
Sure. I don't see anything unethical about it. He was challenging his testimony, saying, "Are you saying this only because you're a subject?" Everybody in the Sheriff's Department has known for months that he was a subject of a federal investigation. Most of us have expected him to be indicted at any time. So it's really a shock to us that he has not been indicted.
I don't believe it's so much a shock to Todd Rogers. I believe it's a great disappointment to his campaign that I haven't been indicted. He has been running around telling people for the last 6 to 8 months, I hope Paul goes to prison. I hope he gets indicted. It's wishful thinking on his part. Now, unless he knows something about with the federal government that I don't know, once again, Todd is just doing what Todd does best, blowing smoke.
There has been a lot more scrutiny because not only did the former undersheriff testify, but he was also outed in federal court as a subject of a federal investigation. The assistant U.S. attorney told him, and said in open court, "You are a subject of a federal investigation," and he acknowledged that he knew that. Now, there is a distinction between subject and target, but I'm not sure what that is. If I'm a subject of a federal investigation, I'm not sure I'd be running for sheriff of Los Angeles County and have any credibility.
Your attorney was not officially notified of your status.
Not like the way that you would expect. Like in the letter that I received, it said specifically, "You're not a target," period. But there was never any mention that, oh, by the way, you're a subject. In fact, I had not even heard that term throughout the course of this investigation attributed to anybody.
You were there on the stand when the prosecutor said what he said, and you confirmed it. What made that all of a sudden such an explosive incident in the media?
Well, if I wasn't running for sheriff, it would have been a non-story. But because I am the former undersheriff, because I am a candidate for sheriff, when you start off your cross examination with 2 sentences or 2 questions, do you know you're the subject of an investigation, of this investigation? And something to the effect of, and if you're incriminated, wouldn't this seriously impact your campaign?
The timing of the trial just before the election is curious. Is this an orchestrated ploy by one or more of the candidates to ruin Mr. Tanaka's bid for sheriff? We ask him what he has heard from the other candidates.
Actually, they're calling for my withdrawal from the race. And the only reason why they're calling for my withdrawal from the race is they must be concerned about what that outcome is going to be on June 3rd.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our questions and leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think Sheriff Baca is working hard to assure that his candidate is elected to cover up any transgressions he committed while serving as sheriff? Number 2, it is widely accepted that candidate Jim McDonnell will be the leading candidate, and that some people think Paul Tanaka is probably his most serious threat. Many of the most powerful people in Los Angeles are supporting Jim McDonnell. Do you think that they manipulated the date of the current trial specifically to knock Tanaka out of the race? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.